These are removal instructions for the front axle sway bar links on the C230 M271 engine. It doesn't really matter what engine you have. Most of the W203s should have sway bar links like this, except for the vehicles with sport suspension, which has M12 bolts rather than M10. I noticed on my car that on my passenger side front wheel, it was sitting lower than my driver's side. So essentially my front was tilted downwards on the passenger side. I took a look in the suspension and I noticed that the sway bar link, which is this long rod that connects from the sway bar, this large black bar, up to the shocks, the ball joint had actually popped out, and this caused the wheel or this side of the suspension to sit a lot lower. As you can see, the ball joint is completely out of its socket. So today I'll just show you how to remove the sway bar links on the passenger side. On the driver's side is identical. The job is a 7mm socket, a 1/2" multi-angle ratchet with a 5/8 socket and a 5/8 open box wrench. You'll also need 2 jacks. I have 1 jack holding up the car. The second jack is to raise the suspension. As you saw in the earlier video, you noticed that the socket and the ball joint were not aligned, and that's because the sway bar actually holds up the suspension a little. So when it broke loose, it sagged. So in my case, or in your case, what you need to do is get a second jack, and you want to jack it up at the lower control arm, and keep it in position. It might be a little hard to see, but you see this ball joint socket right here that's attached to the sway bar. On the rear of it, you'll have the piece sticking out, which is part of the bolt. That piece is a 16mm hex bolt, and the nut over here is a 5/8 nut. And likewise on top, where it attaches to the strut, is the same thing. So you have a M10 bolt with a 16mm head where you can attach a socket to, and the bolt holding it in place is a 5/8 bolt. Yes, I was surprised to see that it's a 5/8 bolt and not in a metric, but I tried a 15 and a 16 and neither fit, and 5/8 fit the best. I'm just going to crack the 5/8 nut on the top portion of the sway bar link connection loose. You'll notice that if you keep turning with the ratchet, all you'll end up doing is just turn the ball joint in its socket, and the bolt will never come loose. What you need to do now is take the 5/8 box wrench, put it on the bolt, and take the 6mm socket onto this end part and loosen it up that way. Arm removed, not control arm, sorry, I keep saying control arm. Sway bar link removed. As you can see, that is the broken side. That's the 5/8 bolt. And on my top side, the rubber has been torn, so clearly this is something that I needed to replace anyways. This is the replacement part. It's made by Moog. It was relatively inexpensive. I believe it was $40-ish at CarQuest in Toronto. As you can see, it looks significantly more beefier compared to the old one. That's the old one, and that's the new one. So hopefully this will last quite a long time. They also do come with a lifetime warranty on the whole unit. I noticed one difference with this is on the old sway bar link, the the bolt actually has a 6mm head, but on the Moog, instead of a 6mm head, there's that piece right there that you can take some wrenches to hold it in place while you tighten the sway bar link. I also want to note that these are serviceable. You can see the Zerk fitting that you can use to grease up the joint when you desire. So on the bottom, you see that the ball joint that came loose is still attached to the sway bar. This is where the multi-angle half-inch ratchet is really useful. And what I mean by multi-angles is that it does this. I'm pretty sure there's another name for it, but it's passing my mind right now. And why you want this is if you look at the position, sorry, let's get some lighting here. If you look at the position of the bolt, it's actually on the rear. So if you just have a traditional breaker bar, you're going to be, under the wheel well, which is a little annoying. So this is why, one of these tools is really useful, especially in tight spaces. If you're doing any suspension work, your caliper, carrier bolts, this is a really good tool. You're installing Moogs. Sorry. So if you're installing Moogs, you'll notice that this end of the bolt no longer has a 6mm nut. They have this instead, this piece right here, and it's a 18mm. You need an 18mm wrench for that. On the top side, it's a little strange because there's not a lot of clearance for you to put a wrench to hold that bolt in place. So what you have to end up doing is going from under, I'll try to show you here, but essentially you're just going under behind this bracket to hold that piece in place. It's a little annoying, but it's not too bad. At least there's a solution to it.